sense in going home.
Ain't no sense in going home.
Jody's got your girl and gone.
Jody got your girl and gone.
Ain't no sense in feeling blue.
Ain't no sense in feeling blue.
Jody got your sister too.
Jody got your sister too.
Sound off.
1, 2.
Sound off.
3, 4.
Break it on down.
1, 2, 3, 4.
1, 2, 3, 4.
Hey, Sergeant Hardy.
Hey, Sergeant Hardy.
Tell by your car you like to party.
Tell my college like to party.
Come to the dormitory after 10.
Come to the dormitory after 10.
Okay, folks, that can mean only one thing. We got a Jody going, and it's time for David's pick. And love to start our show off with a Jody, and that everybody remembers when you were going through basic or going through anything in the military, any branch of them. Well, the only one I can address is the Navy. I don't know how far they can go on one side of the ship before they fall in the water. But anyway, I love those Jodies, and quite frankly, they got me through a lot of tough forced marches and double time and everything else by listening to them. And I don't know of a person that's been in the military that doesn't love and has a favorite Jody of one kind or the other. And with that being said, we've got a very special guest on today. It's Colonel Retired William T. Whitey White, and we're going to get to Whitey in just a moment. But like I've started all of my shows lately, is that because of a very close friend of mine, and I'm sure there are a number of instances like this across the country with the folks that are listening and are vets, that you've got a friend or had a friend that was exposed more drastically than necessary to Agent Orange. And I'm glad to say I talked to my friend that we started this when he was having surgery, and because of Agent Orange, and he's doing quite well now and has gotten his speech back, and I'm very, very proud of J. Roy, and I dedicate a moment of silence to him every week. And so with that being said, if you all don't mind, just give us a moment of silence and thank everybody, and thank the vets for doing what they've done, our active duty folks, and also keep in mind our first responders. So with that, we'll come back in just about 30 seconds, a minute, and start talking to Whitey White, retired Lieutenant Colonel Whitey White. And he is great and has done one of everything, and we'll go into that in just a moment. So I'll be back momentarily. Okay, with that, thank you for taking a moment with us on America's Web Radio. And now I would like to introduce William T. White, retired Lieutenant Colonel William T. White. And like with all officers, because I was enlisted, I stand at attention while we're doing the show. Sir, how you doing?
Hey, good morning, David. Pleasure to be with you.
Do you mind giving me a parade rest at some point?
I was just going to say, be at ease, please.
Thank you, sir. All the respect in the world for the officers and what they have done and given us. And I've got to make one political comment, and that is that no matter what happens, we still have the best country in the world. And we have the best military and the best folks serving in our military of any place in the world. And I am delighted that I can interview our veterans. I can interview folks that are active duty right now. And as I always mention, I did not serve in Nam. I'm what they call now a Vietnam era veteran. And what that means is that it's all in spelling of the word era. I spell it E-R-R-O-R, and the VA spells it E-R-A. But, I made plenty of mistakes when I was in, so I figure it must be E-R-R-O-R, era. But anyway, so Lieutenant Colonel White, better known as Whitey, and if you don't mind me calling you that, I'd appreciate it, sir.
Not at all. In fact, I think most everyone that I know calls me by that call sign.
And, I have all the respect in the world for Whitey in that he used to put my tax dollar and your tax dollar, $1 million or better, more than $1 million at a whack, on a postage stamp. He was a Navy fighter pilot, and I don't know, how often do they check your sanity putting a plane on a floating, rocking ship? I mean, you sort of got to be you got to be a little crazy to do that, don't you?
You do, David. It's back in the 60s, the United States sent a monkey up in a spaceship to prove that we could do it, and they were crazy to think of doing something like that. And when you think about landing an aircraft on a carrier at 150 miles an hour in a very small angled runway that's pitching up and down, you do have to be a little bit on the crazy side.
All it takes is one oops.
We go through months and months of training. I was, just to clarify, I was in the A-6E Intruder to start with as a Bombardier Navigator. I was the last one to get to the fleet, so I only got to spend about 5 years in the platform, and ended up doing a deployment on the USS Enterprise back in 1996. It was the last deployment of the A-6E Intruder, and during all those months leading up to it, we did months and months of training and spent hundreds of hours getting ready to deploy. So I won't say you ever become complacent with landing on an aircraft carrier, but you get to the point where your muscle memory takes over and you're able to focus on things around you and then still get the aircraft back on the deck.
I tell you, I was a general aviation, and I was always delighted when I walked away from the plane, But
every good landing every landing is a good landing.
Yes, sir. And what do they used to call it? It was a controlled crash?
That's right. Yes, sir. As you're coming in during the daytime, and I'll just plug the Navy side of the flying for a second. During the daytime, when you're holding overhead the carrier, everyone is stacked at different 1,000-foot intervals, depending on what platform you were flying. And my reference is from 20 years ago, so they may have changed slightly. But after your mission, you would come back and you would hold overhead the aircraft carrier on a nice day. And I'm telling you, it is a choreographed ballet on how everything is done without a single word being spoken on the radio. Everything's done visually, and it is just some of the most fun that you can have, better than any ride at Disney, where you're coming in, and, for the takeoffs, you go from 0 to 150 knots roughly in 1.8 seconds, and it's just a very dynamic environment. And then when you're coming in for a landing during the daytime, everything is very quiet because no one's talking on the radio, and you go from 125, 130 miles an hour, or 100 knots, I should say, to 0 if you obviously catch the wire. So it's extremely dynamic. Lots of things are happening, even though there's not a whole lot of chatter going on the radio. A lot of fun. Really, daytime is a lot of fun.
Whitey, was that, when you're talking about no audio communication, was that light signals, or is it the flag signals or the pallet type signals?
Well, when you come back to the ship from your mission, everyone's holding overhead. And the intruders, we were at 8,000 feet. 6,000 feet. So we would be holding, and there would be F-14s below us, and F-18s would be below them because they were so short of fuel. But after the next cycle, every event is called a cycle. After the next cycle launched all the airplanes that were going out, those of us that were overhead, there would be what's called a yellow gear, one of the things that pulls the aircraft around the flight deck to park them. Mm-hmm. It would be sitting in the middle of the flight deck. Well, when they moved that, everybody would just start descending and like kind of like a corkscrew fashion, and then you would drop down to 800 feet, come in for the break, and if you're a flight of 2 or more, everybody breaks at different intervals. And as you're coming around, you get the gear down at about the 180, maybe the 90, depending on how fast you're going. But we were landing, once we got good at it, we were landing aircraft about every 45 to 50 seconds.
Wow. And
yeah,
how far out would you go in your holding pattern away from the landing craft?
Well, during the day, or during operations, the Intruder was known for its capability of getting into deep targets. They would we had the ability to refuel in flight, and we had the ability to give fuel if we had extra. So everyone would coordinate depending on what the mission was as to who's going to be in what position on the strike. And so as you would come back overhead, if you had extra gas, you would just go as fast as you could because obviously it's a lot more fun. But if you were low on fuel, then you would have to come back on the throttles and try to conserve it so that you would have fuel to get obviously back to the ship. And you have different what we call ladders that you would every if you were 10 minutes from landing, you needed such amount of fuel. If you were half an hour from landing, or 45 minutes or an hour, depending on what it was, then you would know what your schedule was for the fuel burn, and so you could determine, how far you could go, and then of course there were tankers that were always airborne that would help you out if an emergency arose or some issue where you couldn't get back on the ship. So whoever the brain trust that designed all these carrier operations over the decades did a very, very well thought out plan to get the aircraft on and off the ship. That's daytime. Nighttime's a little
without communications, audio communications. If you'd taken fire and had been hit, how would you notify the ship that
Now, when I say it's no audio, that's if everything's going normal. Obviously, if you have an emergency or if you're in some kind of situation that you need to get on, if you're men or emergency fuel, we call them Joker and Bingo. If you're at emergency fuel, then obviously you're going to be talking to someone because as you're coming in, you probably would be given first priority to land since you're low on fuel. And if you miss the wire or have to go around for some other reason, then sometimes if needed, there would be an airborne tanker that would meet you just as you came off the ship. And I did that role several times when we had some Hornets and Tomcats that needed to get a little extra gas because they were having a rough time trying to get on the ship. And it's people thinking about landing on an aircraft carrier. As you're flying straight into it, you have to realize that the runway is turned 10 or 11 degrees, depending on which ship you're on. And then, so you have to kind of fly to where it's going to be. And then as you're coming around at the 45, we call it, you get a lot of turbulent wind that's coming off the tower, the superstructure of the aircraft carrier, because they're moving about 10 or 15 knots, and so depending on how much wind is being blown over the deck, they need about 24 knots of wind in order to recover the aircraft. So, there's a lot of things that come into play there. You've got the angle of the runway. If it's rough seas, it could be doing what's called a Dutch roll, where it's pitching up and down and sideways. And then you've got the turbulence of the wind as the superstructure of the aircraft carrier is moving. So it's a lot of things that go into it. It's not just fly straight in.
The carrier's turning into the wind, so you'll be landing into the wind, correct?
Yes, sir. You want to have for us, it was 22 to 24 knots of wind over the flight deck. Now, if they had natural wind or a combination, or they had to generate the wind themselves by driving the aircraft carrier that fast, or a combination of the two, depending on what the situation was, that's kind of the amount of wind you wanted coming across the flight deck.
I can't imagine landing on an aircraft carrier, in a 30, 40 second span, every 30 or 40 second spans. And, I applaud all the time. I think our Constitution is one of the grandest documents ever written in history. And then I look at where we have advanced technologically with aircraft carriers and our aircraft and everything else. We are the greatest country in the world, and we'll run a spot here in a second, and I promote every kid that's graduating from high school or college, if they haven't decided on what they want to do in life, take a look at the military. I know my son that's a major in the Air Force loves it, and if I were 110 years younger and had the opportunity to go back through it, I think I would seriously look at, staying in, and it's just a great business to be in, occupation, the fringe benefits.
David. If I could just kind of elaborate on that a little bit.
Yes, sir.
I love the military. Obviously, I did my first career in it. Made lifelong friends, and I think that you need to have, in order, for some of these young men and women that are coming out of school now, you need to have that mentality of, I'm here to do what my superiors tell me to do. Every one of us have a superior officer, whether it's all the way up to the president who is answering to the taxpayer. But you have to be able to follow orders. You have to be able to give tough orders sometimes. With all of that said, though, I don't think that the military should be used as a social experiment. So if you're able to complete the mission, male or female, black or white, gay or straight, irrelevant. As long as you can do the mission and you have the desire to make our military stronger and better, I believe the military is for you. But if you're there to try to change the way things have been done, then you're going to meet with resistance from a lot of the higher ups, because right now the military works very well. We are an efficient machine.
Oh, it just absolutely, to me, just absolutely incredible. And you made a point. The people that have, and this could only be for one reason, and that's dedication. The people that have gone before all of us, that have worked out the ideas, put ideas into play, said, hey, we can make a plane land on a ship at sea. That had to take some forethought too, and what they've done with it, and what they've done with weapons, what we've done with everything to make, and it's because we are a free country, and there is no limit on imagination in the United States. You can be what you want to be, and you can dream the biggest dreams in the world, and if there's a place that can provide or make those dreams come true, it's the United States. And in many, many, many cases, I cringed when NASA was shut down because of the great, incredible technology and products that came out of NASA, in the beginning. And now we're back to it, and hopefully, again, those rewards, imagination and following through is just incredible. And who knows what they'll think of next. It's just
being a aerospace engineering graduate of Mississippi State, we have
heck. A lot of people
didn't even know.
A lot of people didn't even know Mississippi had that kind of degree. They thought it was all fried chicken and pumpkin pie.
Well, there was initially a lot of that because it was an agriculture and mechanical when it first was founded in 1878, but it has developed into a fairly reputable engineering school, and we supply a lot of engineers to the Redstone Arsenal, Huntsville area, and several of my friends are kind of higher up GS-15s over there, and I was talking with one of them the other day and had mentioned to him that I was interested in being an astronaut because I wanted to be the first man to Mars when they send someone later this decade. And he told me, his name is Greg, and he said, Whitey, you do realize that the first trip is going to be a one-way only. And I said, well, maybe I won't be volunteering for that one just yet.
Wow, I hadn't heard that. I didn't know that.
Well, I mean, this was last year, so hopefully we'll be able to put another man on the moon and then maybe even send a person to Mars.
Wow. Well, if any country can, it's the United States of America. You mentioned something early on, too, and I say this every time, is that, in my opinion, the military is the biggest fraternity and sorority in the world. And you meet people that are lifelong friends, just like you've said. And you also, you walk into a restaurant, you walk into the airport, wherever it might be, and one vet can pick out another vet in a heartbeat. And if they're not wearing their caps from a deployed ship at some point or the other, you still can pick them out. And if they are in uniform, please thank them and buy them dinner or lunch or whatever it might be.
There were many. I came on just after Desert Storm, and there was I spent a lot of time in the Masonic organization, which has a lot of veterans in it, but most of them are the Vietnam and Korea era. And so I go out of my way to thank them, and if I'm able to purchase them a meal just to say thank you for everything they did, because all their sacrifices made it much easier for me to in my career. So I'm extremely grateful to those that I see out there.
Nicely said, sir. I appreciate that. My dad was Navy and commander in the Navy, and was also a Mason, 32nd degree. And I failed my family only one big way that I know of, and that's that I didn't become a Mason. And my dad and my both grandfathers and wanted, and I just didn't ever make the cut. But anyway, with that being said, you've gotten more. I've got to ask one that I don't know about, is the Oglethorpe Medal. What is that, sir?
Well, when I left I was the last Bombardier Navigator. I was the last person actually to get to the Intruder fleet, so I was only there for a short time. So when they decommissioned that community, the A-6E Intruder, I went over to the Air Force as a Navy guy to fly in the F-15E model, the Strike Eagle, down at Seymour Johnson. And that was a 3-year tour. So when that tour was up, as a Navy guy, I got out and went to I left active duty and went to the Georgia Air National Guard full time, and was started off in the B-1 bomber, and then there were 2 units that had it. So the active duty pulled those back from the Guard units, and we ended up flying in Joint Star. So I say all of that. That's what I retired out of. I say all that to say that when I went to retire, typically, everyone is given a retirement medal, and they started asking, about my history as a flyer, and being in those platforms, I was the only person in the history of aviation to ever have been combat rated in those platforms. So they wanted to, from the story I was told by the commander when I was retiring, was that they wanted to do something a little bit more special than just a normal achievement or meritorious service medal. So for the state of Georgia, we have what's called the Oglethorpe Award, and it's worn around the neck as a medallion, but it's to honor your entire career of military service. And being the only person that was ever combat rated in those platforms, they awarded me that medal, and I was only the second person, and I don't believe anyone has since been awarded that medal in the state of Georgia.
In your bio, it does seem like you closed a few platforms.
I couldn't keep a job, is what I've been told.
Well, with that being said, we're going to take one quick break, and we'll be back with Lieutenant Colonel William T. White, Whitey White, right after this. And stay with us. This is fun. I love it. Whitey, am I missing anything?
No, sir. I'm having a great time reminiscing some of the old stories. I don't know exactly what your audience wants to hear, but I'm truly enjoying having a little trip down memory lane.
Well, good, and we'll come back in just about 3 seconds. Hang on, sir.
Thank you for listening.
Okay, we're back on the air with Whitey White, retired lieutenant colonel. And, I made you a promise, Whitey, that I wouldn't ask any hardball questions or something that might stump you or embarrass you or anything like that. But I've got to renege on my promise to you. And I always ask one question of my guests, and it's a pretty hard one, so be prepared. Get your hand on the yoke and be ready to shoot me down or whatever. Can you name one veteran friend of yours or one veteran that you know that can tell only one story?
That can tell a story?
Tell only one. When a veteran gets to talking, he goes from one story to... I've never seen a veteran that can only tell one story.
I've been very fortunate to have been in multiple platforms and multiple services, and have a long list of friends that are what I consider true American heroes, and every one of them has 20 or 30 stories that they could tell you without even sitting down to think about it. I mean, we're very fortunate in the military to be able to experience a lot of different things, and so we make some very vivid memories with our friends, our brothers and sisters in arms.
You get in a situation that you've got about 6 or 8 veterans at a table, and you get into the one-ups. Well, he did that, but wait until you hear this story.
And God bless those guys that are sitting around that table, because they're the ones that, did all the hard work, you might say, that made it much easier for those of us who are coming along after them. So
the heavy lifting. Anytime
I get an opportunity to listen to them, I take that chance.
All right, it's a shame because, well, it's nature, it happens, but we're losing so many of our World War II veterans, and now it's creeped into our Korean veterans, and it's also now with our Vietnam veterans. And I bless I bless people like Babcock that writes these stories down and has published a lot of them. And there are so many great stories. And like I said earlier, please, if you're graduating from high school or college and you're not sure what you want to do, take a look at the military.
I agree. I'm a member of the Red River Valley Fighter Pilot Association, which is a unit that was created right after Vietnam by some of the Air Force icons. Robin Olds and some of those guys. And they're all, it's gotten so bad with some of the radiation and the Agent Orange and a lot of that stuff that even the flyers are coming into, that they form their own medical committee in order to try to get the VA to start taking a harder look at it.
Well, this is one thing that I applauded and still applaud President Trump for signing was the Blue Water Bill.
Agreed, yes.
You know, that if people don't know what that was, it was that folks in the Navy and Coast Guard, and a lot of folks don't understand or don't know that the Coast Guard played a very active role in Vietnam. And
yes, sir.
They would get sprayed with Agent Orange, and then now they couldn't, or in the past few years, they couldn't get claims in the VA or any medication or any medical treatment because of Agent Orange, because our government said, well, you were Navy, you weren't in country, and they were sitting offshore and getting sprayed. And,
right.
You know, so I'm glad that that's been taken care of.
I am too. I mean, as a Navy guy, we used to pick on the Coast Guard guys, saying that they were brown water ops, meaning that they never went 12 miles past the coastline. But I was sitting, I remember it like it was yesterday. It was August 1996. I was sitting in my jet on the flight deck in full flight gear in the Persian Gulf, and it must have been 130 degrees in the cockpit. Wow. Since we weren't cranked up. And I'm sitting there sweating like crazy, thinking, what in the world am I doing right now? And alongside of us in the Persian Gulf, a Coast Guard cutter pulls right up and is steaming alongside of us. So when I saw that, I had to change my tune. I've got a lot of respect for the guys in the Coast Guard now.
Well, I did the same thing with conscientious objectors during the Vietnam period. And so many of them are heroes, just as I always salute our dust-off pilots. They saved so many lives. And
yes,
so
sir.
did conscientious objectors that wouldn't carry a weapon, but they carried that Red Cross bag and would go into the heaviest of battles to save wounded. And, this is... we had a show on earlier today, our Doctor's Lounge, and Dr. Shears was doing the show today. I kept thinking, and I've said this a million times, educate yourself. Educate yourself. We got the greatest opportunity to have learning of all sorts, and you can do it by yourself in front of your computer. You can Google almost anything and come up with an answer and learn about what's happening. I never, until maybe 10 years ago or so, I was in the Vietnam era, but I didn't know what a role the Coast Guard played in it. I had no idea, nor did anybody else ever say anything. I don't remember ever hearing anything about the U.S. Coast Guard being in Vietnam, and yet they were, and they did the river duty a lot, and and they
did. And we had a lot of the special ops units that would spend a lot of time in the small PT boats that would spend a lot of their missions going up and down the not intercoastal water, but those small rivers and streams that fed into the Gulf. They would end up, spending a lot of their time up in there, and a lot of those guys were Coast Guard supported. So, hats off to those guys.
And one other group that I knew, a friend of mine's father was in it, and I didn't know what the hell it was. But another group that is finally getting some recognition is the Merchant Marines during World War II. They were carrying supplies. They were unarmed ships carrying supplies to Europe, and I assume in the Pacific as well. And, they were sunk, they were shot at, they were everything at. And they had absolutely no recognition until even the past few years. And they certainly deserve I don't know what they have now is what they're getting as far as, but if someone was a merchant marine, I certainly do appreciate what they did for us when they were serving, and I don't even know if they're still in service.
They are.
They are.
They are. They even have an academy up in the northeast part of the country. One of my son is a high school junior, and some of he's captain of the swim team now, and some of the guys he swam with prior to this year are actually at the Coast Guard Academy and at the Merchant Marine Academy. So they're still doing quite a bit. And it's when you talk about how the Merchant Marines and the Navy supplied or had so many supplies at sea at any time, and we still do even today. One of the neatest things I've ever seen, David, is we were steaming along in the Mediterranean, and a ship pulls up next to us. It's called an UNREP, an underway replenishment. And what they do is they shoot lines from one ship to the other, and then they'll tow cables over. The two ships are cruising along at 10 or 12 knots, basically tied together, and they're bringing supplies from one ship to the carrier, to include fuel, food, everything you need to conduct the mission that you're tasked with. And then when they're done, just kind of watch it pull away. It's really a unique sight to see, because you don't typically see two ships that big that close together.
Okay, Whitey, I got to ask, because I'm a cynic and I've got a sick mind, how did they keep from bumping into each other?
Well, they have, you have people that are up in the control area, control towers for both, and they know that it's like flying formation. The lead aircraft, or in this case, the biggest ship, the aircraft carrier, is steaming along at a certain path at a certain speed. It's the job of the wingmen in the aircraft or the ship that's doing the underway replenishment to make sure that they are at the exact speed and location that they need to be in order not to collide with each other. So it's really unique. So the guy that's in the lead, or the ship that's in the lead, has to be very steady, because everyone else is keying off of that. And so it takes a lot. I'm sure it takes a lot of work for the ship company guys, the black shoes as we call them, for them to do that. Just like it does for us in the aircraft, not to run into each other. It takes a lot of practice.
Well, the aircraft I can understand. The ships takes a hell of a driver.
I guess
that's the captain, not the driver. But anyway,
he's barking down the orders to them, and you see this even on cruise ships. As they're pulling into a dock, how they'll maneuver it so that they don't hit the dock. Now they've got tugboats and stuff to assist, but a lot of the times it's the captain giving the orders to on how to maneuver.
Wow. Oh, this is so interesting, Whitey. I don't know how to tell you how much I appreciate all the information that you're giving us, and I'm enjoying it. Let me ask, what is your favorite story?
If we're talking military aviation related, it's kind of, as a combat aviator, you're trained to destroy targets. I mean, that's just the nature of war. And we were in Kuwait, and there was a convoy, and this was, some Iraqis, as I understood it, from post, what they call post BDA, post damage assessment, were what we call the bad guys, the Iraqis, and we rolled in with the Mark I, or the Mark 20 Rockeye weapon. It's 247 little bombs inside of a what's called a clamshell. It's inside of one bomb, and I had 12 of those on the aircraft. And to find that convoy and to take that convoy out was probably one of the most rewarding experiences that I've had as a combat aviator. I really enjoyed the challenge of that.
Now, And I'm just curious because I hadn't heard of that, but was it considered a smart bomb as well? Could you direct it?
Can you hear me, David?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. It's not what we call a smart weapon in today's standards. It had a fuse on the front of it in order for the clamshell to open so that the little 247 little bomblets could spread out. But it wasn't post-release guided, meaning it didn't use GPS, it didn't use a laser, it didn't use IR, any of those type stuff. Once you released it, basically it went where you were telling it to go. You didn't have any control over it after it came off the jet. Today's weapons, and I was very fortunate to carry most of them as well, since collateral damage is such a big issue, as it should be when the enemy is hiding in a mosque or near a school or church or something like that, you have to be very precise. So we developed weapons that you could laze the target with a combat laser, and the weapon would fly. And many of us saw it on the Desert Storm videos of the weapon that went through the window or down the chimney.
Right.
So that was put on there by a laser, or the controller was flying it using electro-optical or infrared, or even now they have GPS-guided weapons that are extremely accurate as well. And even one aircraft can release them, and another aircraft can control them. So it's very, very technologically advanced weapons that we have today.
Are, to your knowledge, and if it's something that you can't talk about, then obviously disregard, but are we the most collaterally damaged control country in the world, and we care more about, two things. One is that the United States, I think, probably is more concerned about collateral damage than any other country in the world. And the second thing is we may destroy that country, but we're also the first ones back in it to help rebuild it. And Vietnam is a good example of that. And, and we offer our services beyond belief.
You're opening you're going to open a little bit of a can of worms with this. Back in World War II, we just carpet bombed the living daylights out of the enemy. We didn't care that, houses and schools and all that stuff. Well, I mean, we cared, but we just couldn't prevent that from happening. Well, as technology has increased, we've become more able to deliver a smaller weapon in a more precise fashion so that we can control collateral damage, because we don't want to kill anyone that's innocent, a child or a family member or something, someone that's not, their profession is not the military. So we do our very best in order to prevent doing that at all costs if we can. And we have the technology such that, we're able to put, instead of carpet bombing with 50 500-pounders, you can now take one 250-pounder and fly it into a very precise location and probably do even more damage than, carpet bombing. So yeah, we're very cognizant of that. Now, most, since the Geneva Convention, most countries have tried to adhere to that philosophy, but there's a lot of people or a lot of countries that don't. I mean, they as you saw with Saddam Hussein, he even used chemical weapons on his own people.
Yeah.
So there are a lot of dictators that need to be removed and have been removed in order to save the innocent population, you might say. Now, with that said, I personally don't believe it's the job of the military to go back in and rebuild. I believe there are other organizations that, the job of the military is get in, kill the enemy, achieve the target, whatever that may be, whatever your goal is, and then get out. Now, there are units and organizations, they are designed to then go in rebuild bridges if they were taken out, and do all the different things that needed to help rebuild the infrastructure. But the military's job is not to rebuild it, in my opinion. Ours is to destroy it if that's called upon.
I agree, and if in my opinion, if you're fired at, then it's our job to squelch all fire, and if you're the strongest, be the strongest in everything that we do. Don't go into it halfway, go into it to win. And that's where we had a lot of problems in Vietnam, and
Yes,
a lot of misunderstanding and whatever else you want to call it. But hopefully today it's somewhat different, and it'll depend on whether it stays that way or not in the next few days. But we won't go there. But you know what I'm talking about.
I do. Yes, sir.
So, in your opinion, were we prepared to go into Desert Shield and Desert Storm?
Given the intelligence that we had at the time, I believe we were more than prepared. We spent approximately 6 months there in Saudi Arabia and in the Persian Gulf and different allied countries preparing for all of that. In fact, so much so that we used that known operations and exercises. General Schwarzkopf then, did that fake where it was reported that all these troops were going to be coming in from one direction, and he actually brought them in from the other direction. What that did basically was just, not only did it completely confuse the enemy, but we were able to take that tactic and utterly catch them by surprise and just took them out in just a matter of days instead of what could have gone on for weeks and months. And he that was a brilliant move to do that, because they were thinking we were coming from one direction, and he used all that last 6 months of operations and preparation to come around and attack them from behind. So we were basically able to say, we didn't have to kill quite a few of them, but we were quite effective in that tactic, I thought.
I believe it was the end run.
Yes, sir. That's what he called it. In fact, we had we developed some brand new weapon. I don't want to get off on a rabbit hole here, but there's a weapon that the Air Force carries. It's a 5,000 pound, basically a tank barrel that they turn into a weapon, and it's called the bunker buster.
Oh yeah.
We would drop it. It would go 100 feet down in the ground before it ever exploded, because that was where the bunkers were. And so we developed that in like 47 days.
Wow.
Something like that now takes years, but because of the battle that was coming up during Operation Desert Shield, everyone down at Eglin had just cranked that thing out, and it became, one of the things that ended up shortening the war for us. So it was our while people would give the military guys all the credit, the engineers and the tacticians and all of them that are civilians that do a lot of the support work for the military, they deserve a lot of the credit as well.
One of the things that is, in my opinion, somewhat overlooked, but not totally. But Saddam Hussein was an idiot, and a narcissistic idiot at that, and he was not a military man. He had not gone to any military schools, or he was not a strategist or anything else. He was just a bully, and bullies don't necessarily win, And I think this is one of the reasons that, and Schwarzkopf, no doubt, he was a military man, and I think that's, and he proved it with the end run and with everything else. You fake to the left and you run to the right, or whatever you want to say. And
yeah, that was a brilliant move on his part. He had, for 6 months leading up to it, had everything looking like it was going to come in through the Persian Gulf, Basra and all of those areas up through there. I thought they were going to come that way, and it kind of looked like it was, but then he did the end around and caught everyone by surprise.
And I think he even caught some of the news media by surprise, which I loved. But this is his story is very interesting, and it's like General Dix. It's on our radio station. It just, I can't say it enough. We have the greatest military in the world, and
no doubt
our weapons wouldn't be worth a damn if it wasn't for the people that were in charge of using them. And my hat's off to you. Any pilot, my hat's off to. And everything that our military does, I have respect for. And we can be blamed for a lot of things, but we are still it's sort of like going into a fight, and we're the cleanest fighters in the world, if that makes sense. And I don't know that sometimes we're rewarded by the world for what we do and what we've done. But by the way, I don't give many lieutenant colonels orders, but you're driving me nuts. Are you calling me sir just because I'm older than dirt? Not because I outrank you. I know that. Not as an E5 anyway. But
well, growing up in the South, it was drilled into us that we say sir and ma'am to all of those that we respect. And I even tell my 17-year-old son, I call him sir, and he has learned that as well. And I've heard a lot of nice things of how he acts when he's away from me, because he's been drilled or taught, I should say, how to pay your respects to people. And I say sir to you because I respect what you've done, because it made my career so much easier. So my hat's off to you.
Thank you, sir. And my two boys, one's a CPA and one's, like I said, a major in the Air Force, and both of them were taught the same way, and to respect other people's property. They were taught early on as 2-3-year-olds, you don't go on somebody else's yard without asking them. It's not your yard, it's their yard. And we should have, in my opinion, more of that in our world today. But I can't control everybody's kid by any means. So we just have to go along with what we got. But anything that anybody that sticks out in your mind. I know you've mentioned, just like I have, that we have friends from AIT or whatever it might be, but is there anyone that sticks out in your mind that you would like to give a shout out to?
Well, when you say that, I immediately think of those that gave their all, and there was a Lieutenant Commander Ron Rhino Wise, who was my direct supervisor when I was in the Navy. He perished in a Tomcat accident, and one of the guys that I replaced in that Air Force exchange tour was killed flying in April of 2003 in Operation Iraqi Freedom 2. So, those are the guys I'd like to, shout out to their families. We still stay in touch with them and try to help provide scholarships. And that's one of the things the River Rats, the fighter pilot organization, provides scholarships for the children of those whose have gone on to college. It's that, should they have perished. In Salty's case, he had 2 children that their college has already been taken care of. So we got some great organizations. Just, the person that introduced me to you, Colonel White himself, a member of the Georgia Military Veterans Hall of Fame.
And if I can interrupt you, right? If I can interrupt you with that, I was going to bring this up that I talked to Rick, Colonel White, many times during the week, generally speaking, but he did want me to mention that the induction ceremony that's generally held was scheduled to be held on November the 7th in Columbus, Georgia, is being postponed until a future date at some point when the coronavirus is over with, and we'll be announcing that date. I also want to mention that Georgia has become quite a place for veterans. The Healing Wall in Johns Creek, Georgia, in Newtown Park is great. It's a replica of and it's the one that went traveling all over the United States. It's the replica of the Vietnam Wall in Washington, D.C., a 50% size. It now has a permanent home in Johns Creek, Georgia, and we invite any and everybody to come to Newtown Park and look up their loved ones, their friends, and it's called the Healing Wall, and there's a lot of closure there, and you're always invited to go to Johns Creek and go to the Healing Wall.
Yes, sir. That's that wall itself came to our little small town here in North Georgia, and it was quite the experience to see that.
And one other place, Perimeter Center, has their own memorial to Vietnam veterans, and we invite you to go there. And I tell you, I love the fact that we as a country are daily more and more looking to and giving thanks and respect to veterans like yourself. And I want to publicly thank you for your service, Whitey, and all the people that you served with. And we wouldn't be here today if it wasn't for people like yourself and the veterans that have gone before all of us. And I always want everybody to know that. And again, I want to thank Colonel Rick White, retired, that put you and I together, and he helps me with every show. And he is a wonderful gentleman, a great director of the Georgia Military Veterans Hall of Fame. And I am extremely proud to know Rick and be able to call him a friend.
I agree. He's a wonderful military officer, and then to hear him speak, he spoke at one of the Shriner events that they were putting on for the veterans down in Atlanta, and his speech was one of the most moving monuments to our civility and our community that I've ever heard. It was incredible. If you ever need a fantastic speaker, he is highly recommended.
He's the one, huh? Well, we'll have to put Rick on our speaker list.
Make an even bigger difference.
Whoops.
Consider joining the U.S.
a good
Army
one.
with training.
And we've got so many great. Roger Wise is a super individual, and I tell you what, it's hard to beat a veteran.
Well, we've had some great men that laid the foundation for the veterans organizations that deserve all the accolades there. Great minds that designed how we do our operations. We've got some great leaders even today, and that are they are no nonsense kind of guys that get the job done.
Whitey, we're gonna have to move on. We got another show coming up, but I do want to thank you again for being a part of David's Pick, and I want to thank Rick White again for getting us in touch with each other, and look forward to. I always ask, will you come back?
I would love to come down and be in the studio with you one day, David. I think it'd be a lot of fun.
I think we could handle that just any time. I'm sure Rick will be back in touch with you. Thank you, sir, and thank you for serving our country, and we'll be talking to you soon.
Thank you, David. I appreciate it. Look forward to our next visit.
Thank you, sir. Okay.
You're listening to America's Web Radio on the AmericasBroadcastNetwork.com.